Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, May the 11th, and welcome to our video commentary. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about what is happening between Cuba and Canada, and it all has to do with these attacks, what came to be known as sonic attacks on diplomats. And let me just kind of give you a little background if you're not familiar with it. A couple of years ago, some American diplomats were attacked by some crazy sounds in Cuba. And in the case of some of the diplomats, it impacted their hearing and they had some health issues related to it. When the American government, protested what had happened, the Cuban government blamed it on a natural phenomenon. They blamed it on crickets and maybe some weird natural things. But a Canadian was also attacked or suffered consequences from one of the attacks. And the Cuban government couldn't explain it any other way. They simply said, well, these were crickets who apparently had made a lot of noise. The problem is that if this was a natural event, it would have impacted more than just the American diplomats and these Canadian diplomats. So obviously, there was more to it than that, and the Cuban government did not really uh, work very hard at explaining what had happened. Well, the Canadians are apparently fed up with the Cuban government and their lack of explanations, and they've decided to downsize their embassy in Havana. They're not going to break diplomatic relations or have anything like that. But what they're doing is they're downsizing their embassy. They're cutting back on some of the staff, and the impact, the immediate impact that this is going to have is on Cubans looking for visas to Canada. So the Canadian government said, well, we just don't have the staff right now. And they're basically telling the Cubans looking for visas to go online or to go to another embassy and try to go through a third country. The problem is online is not a very viable option in Cuba because, after all, not many Cubans have access to the online. It's a very expensive and difficult thing to have in Cuba. And the other option of going to another embassy, well, that might work for a while, but my guess is that a lot of the other countries are not going to be crazy about doing all this kind of visa work. I mean, that's just going to be additional work on them. So where this goes from here, I don't know. Clearly, in the short run, it's going to be very difficult for Cubans to get visas. As far as the health of the diplomats, they're still under care. And we're still waiting for some logical explanation as to what happened. Why is it that you had these sonic attacks that apparently are supposed to be natural things like crickets, but they only went after Americans, and in this case, a couple of diplomats, Canadian diplomats as well. So we'll see what happens, but I think it would help the Cuban government if they would apologize or at least come clean by saying, we don't know what happened, and invite the FBI or maybe a Canadian service to go in and look for a reason. There's got to be a reason why this happened. These things just don't happen at random. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, though, the Canadians are cutting back their staff. The United States has a very small staff in Cuba anyway, so I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we shut down the staff, not break diplomatic relations, but just shut down the staff and not have much going at the U.S. Embassy in Havana. Well, thank you for watching. We have all of these on YouTube, on Twitter, and on my blog. And if today is your birthday, happy birthday. Bye-bye, everybody.